I want to start with the CDC. Used to be this respected organization. You can tell me to what degree that respect now would be misplaced. I mean, how the CDC has been damaged by Trump administration policy, but they made an announcement about the MMR vaccine rates for kindergartners. And I guess the latest information reflects that the MMR vaccine, that's measles, mumps, rubella vaccination rates for kindergartners is falling again. This is the fifth year in a row. Can you speak to this and what this means for public health?
Right. So, you remember a month ago we covered this on the radio and we mentioned how the data hadn't come out for this coming school year. And then here we are, the announcement last week. So, just to remind our viewers and our listeners, with measles in particular, all mathematical models show that you need 95% vaccination coverage for measles in particular, because it is such a highly infectious disease, probably one of the most infectious diseases on earth, that one infected person can infect 18 others who are unvaccinated. And so once that rate is 95%, that provides a shield for the community where you live, so that people that can't get vaccinated, so that's babies under 1 year old who are not eligible, pregnant women can't get vaccinated if they haven't been before because it's a live vaccine, people on chemotherapy, people on biologics for autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. When that number dips below 95, you're going to have outbreaks. And this is the fifth year in a row that it's been under 95%. Last year it was 92.7. This year it's 92.5. And that's very concerning. As we've mentioned before, we've seen 1,200 cases this year. It's the highest in 30 years. We've had 3 deaths, unfortunately, from measles, many more hospitalizations. And so we're seeing the effects of that vaccination shield for measles in particular being under 95%.
So, do you expect to see then a corresponding rise in, for example, measles, which, as you say, is so very contagious?
I mean, I think we have, right? Like if it's been under 95 for the last 5 years, it's not a surprise that already by April, we were far exceeding the number of cases from the year before. And I think as, RFK and as the HHS secretary and the rest of his cohorts at the different public health institutions right now continue to spread misinformation about vaccines, it's just gonna get worse. I mean, the one good thing that, if you look at last year was 92.7, this year 92.5, wasn't that much of a drop. It's just that when you take it in the whole of the 5-year cohort that it's been under 95, that's an additive effect. And again, just to remind people, if you've had your 2 shots, you're not at risk for getting infected unless you're an older adult who's immune compromised who may need a 3rd dose. But for the most part, almost 99.9% of people that have been vaccinated are going to be protected. It's just that those that aren't or are unable to, for whatever reason, chose not to because of, maybe they had a bad experience with a live vaccine in the past, like anaphylaxis or severe allergic reaction, or choosing not to do so because of religious reasons. In the past, when the coverage has been 95% plus, they've still been protected by that shield in that community. But as the models show, when it gets under 95%, that shield falls apart.
These are distressing times for this kind of thing, for the preventive medicine that has really protected society. I mean, you think about through time,
Mm-hmm.
one of the real challenges to humanity has been infectious disease. And it's remarkable to me to turn the clock back on this the way this is happening.
Yeah, it's shocking that, as you said, we're sort of going backwards when we could be really making a lot of strides forward. And you and I have talked about this before in regards to like the mRNA vaccine platform and how it's such a remarkable achievement that that platform can turn around new vaccines in a number of months compared to the way we used to do it previously, where it would take so much longer for the R&D and the development and the mass production. And looking at mRNA's promise for even targeted vaccine cancer therapy, where they can basically take a person's specific tumor cells and modify an mRNA vaccine to target and kill specifically that patient's cancer cells, is remarkable. But mRNA has become a four-letter word for RFK and Trump and all the Maha cohort, unfortunately.
It's really amazing that it was that that you just described, the mRNA technologies that were being used to attack cancer, that were really being redeployed against COVID. And that was the great hope, that this technology, this vaccine technology, this mRNA technology could be effective in this other area. But I want to double back to what you just said. Is mRNA technology, in terms of cancer treatment, et cetera, threatened by this new administration?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it recently, or you and I discussed offline. I believe it was Merck who had a major contract with the government for an mRNA vaccine for bird flu that RFK canceled. Um, it's like I don't even know how to respond to that anymore. It's just we were already there. There were already human trials, safety profiles were already done and complete. It was effective. And again, using the mRNA vaccine for something like bird flu, which hopefully doesn't take off and become a pandemic, by the time we roll out a potential vaccine and we see that, again, hypothetically, bird flu had mutated, you could go back, scientists can go back into that platform, tweak it in small specific areas, redeploy another vaccine that's more effective. And so now that you've canceled that contract with government because of this promotion of, vaccine, pharmaceutical companies are making all this money off of us, they don't really care about our health, and they're just pushing out vaccine after vaccine after vaccine to make money, and contributing to that misinformation around companies. Now we're kind of flying blind if bird flu were to take off, which thankfully so far it hasn't.
It's interesting that you frame it this way, because I'm thinking about all the ways in which medicine has evolved positively, and now it's sort of being undermined by the general idea that the big pharma companies are the problem. And I've always felt, because there is a big bad aspect to pharma from a price standpoint, particularly, I always felt as though the advances in pharmacology, and this is a question, so I'm asking you to either verify this proposition or not, that the advances in pharmacology have always been fairly sound. And I shouldn't say always, but generally been very sound. And there is a lot of public money that goes into this development. There's also a lot of private money, and there are a lot of exchanges because of those various capital commitments. We saw it with COVID-19. But
Right.
my point is simply, the problem with big pharma, I've always felt, hasn't been so much that the vaccines they're offering or the pills they're offering don't work. The problem has been they work, but I can't afford them as an American. And I wonder if you can tell me how much of that statement and how much of that idea that I've just proffered is true.
Right. So I think you're reflecting a lot of the general sentiment, but I think the issue is much more complicated, and it's drug by drug, vaccine by vaccine specific, right? So if you look at the COVID vaccines in particular, they were funded by US government funding, right? And that's our taxpayer dollars. And that was Operation Warp Speed by President Trump, who, I mean, again, I've said this before, it's amazing that he doesn't talk about this as much anymore, because it was such a remarkable scientific achievement to come up with multiple vaccines against a pandemic in a matter of 9 months. Like total game changer. Then there was some concern on the back end of that when Pfizer and Moderna started to price the vaccines. And I remember that made sense. That was like, well, we paid for this already, and now you're asking us to pay for this again. The flip side of that coin too, if you look at pharmaceutical drug manufacturing over the last few decades, a lot of the drugs that come out are what we call Me Too drugs. Like, they're drugs that are already out there on the market for a specific disease or ailment, and just through chance, through research trials, companies find out, oh, there's this potential side effect here on this drug, that we could remarket it for something else. And so there hasn't been a lot of new, innovative, brand new R&D, I think, in the last few years, and like novel treatments and things. And I think that's where people get concerned. So if you have a pharmaceutical company that has drug A for ailment A, and then they find out that a side effect of drug A could treat ailment B, and then they charge a lot of money for that, that's the whole Me Too concept. That I have problems with ethically as well. So, I mean, again, to answer your question, I think it's very drug or vaccine specific.
Yeah, and that's probably right. I mean, and I think we all tend to think sort of in generalities that perhaps, aren't appropriate for how there is a lot of nuance to all of this, and there are a lot of
Sure.
specifics. So, RFK Jr. is what, going to fire members of this U.S. Preventive Task Force? What's happening with RFK Jr. and the firings that seem to be going on at the highest levels at HHS?
Yeah, I've been watching this very closely with a lot of concern. Just to remind our viewers and listeners again, so the U.S. Preventative Task Force is an independent collection of public health experts that basically give ratings, usually rating A and B, to screening tests that they recommend that everybody have at a certain age to catch things like cancer at a very early onset where they can still be treated. It's public health at its basis. And the Affordable Care Act a few years ago said that private insurers have to cover anything that the U.S. Preventative Task Force recommends with an A or a B. So just to give you an example, like colon cancer, right? Screening starts at 45 for every adult. And if you go to get a colonoscopy and you have Blue Cross and Blue Shield, they can't charge you for that. If you're a female, you need to get your mammography at 40. Insurance can't charge you for that. And then the other ones include cervical cancer screening for girls at 21, and then basic things like blood pressure checks, diabetes screening, screening for depression, and also pre-exposure prophylaxis for people at high risk of HIV that want to take a medication daily to prevent them from getting HIV. All those things are recommended by the Preventative Task Force. Excuse me.
Sure, go ahead, of course.
I think there was a bug in my room and it actually flew into my mouth.
Oh, no.
It's like, you talk about these things happening in movies, but that actually
That's
does
not
happen.
insured, so don't, yeah, all right,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right. And so it's really scary, because what we're going to end up seeing is that you're going to have more sick patients that are not going to be able to afford these tests because insurance doesn't cover, and they're going to come to the ER when they're really sick. And so hopefully he doesn't do it, but excuse me, he's threatening to, and we're heading that way.
So, but this is what's really interesting to me, because what we're talking about is that public policy, it's not only a question of vaccines, not only a question of firing these people, it's not only a question of putting these people on board that would likely support blindly the kind of elimination of vaccines and a lot of preventive medicine, but it affects your ability to get insurance for a lot of those things that you're talking about, for those colonoscopies, for the preventive medicine strategies that so many of us employ. So this is a dollars and cents issue also, beyond just a medical philosophy issue.
Yeah, right. And I think a lot of people will just choose not to pay for these screening tests. And then you're going to have more colon cancer, more lung cancer, more cervical cancer as we go through it. And it just mind boggles like why he would want to fire this group. Like, if you're all about making America healthier again, this doesn't seem to be the best way to do it. But I think fundamentally it's an attack on it's an attack on our medical institutions. And it's an attack on mainstream medical institutions. And he just has a serious bone to pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent with the idea somehow that these flaws in these American medical institutions are part of the conspiracy to keep America sick, to make money off the those who are sick. What do we know about the new CDC director?
Yeah, so Dr. Susan Menarez, I was doing some research about her this morning. So just to back up a little bit, if you look at who we have at FDA, Marty Makary from Johns Hopkins, He's in line with RFK. He's been lately, talking about how he knows people personally who suffered bad side effects from the COVID vaccines, and he's just sowing a lot of doubt and misinformation about COVID vaccines. Then you have Dr. Jay Bhattacharya at NIH, who was one of the writers of the Great Barrington Declaration at the beginning of COVID, which was basically let it rip, like let the virus just go through the community, no lockdowns, no masks, nothing, only protect the elderly and the sick and the people most at risk. So these are the kind of guys that you have in charge of our public health institutions. And then you have Dr. Menares, who is a PhD in infectious disease from University of Wisconsin-Madison. She did her dissertation at Stanford. She has years of experience in government, in public health, international health security, disaster relief. She, in her confirmation hearing, was a huge proponent of vaccines, and she talked about the importance of the COVID vaccine specifically. So I was like researching this morning. I was like, where is the hook? I'm like, how did she make it through this process? Like, what am I missing here? Because she's excellent, and she has been the interim CDC director, and then they just made it official. So I don't know. I'm waiting for the penny to drop here, but because her credentials seem great, and and then you look on Twitter, like people like Laura Loomer and the rest of the Maha people are critical of her and her support for vaccines. So that makes me happy that this is somebody that's making them nervous. So I don't know how it's going to work, but I mean, I think compared to the other heads of the public health institutions, I'm glad to see she's there, especially at the head of the CDC.
I mean, she may have a rough time. I mean, with the defunding of so many of the those agencies that lead into the CDC, that connect to the CDC, and with so many doctors that she has inherited, if you will, the new crew, which is, as you say, they're all part of this conspiracy theory that RFK Jr. signs on to. In our last minute or two, I wonder if you could also just give me a word about Alzheimer's. There were 2 new studies on Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is one of those elusive things that is the scourge of generally old age. Speak to these 2 new studies, if you would, please.
Right. So, as you know, Alzheimer's is the #1 cause of dementia. And so at the International Alzheimer's Association convention or something to that effect recently, there were 2 new studies. And basically, the first study said, recognize the importance of, moderate exercise, even just like daily walking for 30 minutes to reduce your risk for developing Alzheimer's. And then the second study, looked at the combination of exercise and good lifestyle choices. So again, exercise, healthy eating, the importance of social interaction, which I thought was really interesting, and also, tests that improve your brain cognition, that create new neurons, that help those neurons fire across the synapses. So doing puzzles, crossword puzzles, learning a new language, all that stuff is really important. And in both those studies, they focus in particular on participants who had a high risk for developing dementia, whether that was relatives who already had Alzheimer's, or if they were already showing evidence of the ApoE4 gene, which is the one that we think plays a role in the development of Alzheimer's. So these were in patients who were at high risk for Alzheimer's. But I think, these recommendations can apply to anybody, whether you're at high risk or not, particularly the importance as you get older of maintaining those friendships, those social interactions, getting outside, doing puzzles, crossword puzzles, any kind of brain test that you can do to just increase your cognition, the importance of that.
It's wild. My dad, the last decade of his life, brilliant guy, absolutely off the scale brilliant. And I mention this just because, he wanted to protect that gray matter. And he was always, maybe always overstates it, but I'd say 90% of the time, I'd be talking to him and he'd be talking about some complicated, and he'd be doing a crossword puzzle at the same time. I mean, imagine, like, it was so funny. I mean, we'd sit there and I'm visiting with my mother and him, and he's doing a crossword, and like, we're in the middle of a conversation. He'll go, excuse me, what's a 6-letter word for or whatever? And I thought it was just the greatest. He lived to 95, like a month
Amazing.
before his
There you
95th
go.
birthday, and he was pretty sharp, man. I got to give the guy credit. You know, I mean, he started to lose it a little bit after COVID. He got hit by COVID, and that took a lot of his cognition away. But
Yeah.
but he was an early adopter of your crossword puzzle thing. Very, very funny to see it. But I can smile and laugh, but the reality is you're saying, look, it has a real effect on the elasticity of the brain going into your senior years.
I mean, it's just you have to think about the brain as any other muscle. You go to the gym to, work out your muscles, why not your brain as well?
And then you see this from Becky. These studies make me sad as my family members did all of those things. But clearly, Becky, the implication is that, they still succumb to Alzheimer's. I mean, just as you say, these things can help you like the gym helps you, but ultimately, nature takes its course, biology takes its course, and also environmental toxins take their course. I would imagine that there's some element there. Kim asks, can you ask about the best ways to prevent stroke once you've had one? Because her mom just did have a mild stroke. Can you speak to that, Dr. Daignault?
Right. So, stroke is something I see every shift, probably 3 or 4 times a shift. We have to call it code stroke by patients that come in, and we're a comprehensive stroke center. So, I don't, again, without knowing the details of your mom and, a minor stroke, we call it like a TIA, transient ischemic attack. And we always admit those patients even with minor strokes, because the importance, as you mentioned, is your risk for having a stroke in the next 30 days, once you've had a small one, is pretty high. So then the importance for us is to sort of optimize a number of things. So your blood pressure management, your blood sugar control, your control of your cholesterol, and then also talk about the importance of your lifestyle choices, like what you eat, how much you're exercising. And in a lot of cases, neurologists will start patients on aspirin, or what we call dual antiplatelet therapy. So you take aspirin and Plavix. And just a caveat with aspirin, we used to always put everybody on aspirin, and people used to always just take a daily aspirin. And then a couple years ago, we found that the risk of taking a daily aspirin, the risk of gastrointestinal bleeding, other side effects outweigh that potential benefit, unless you have had a diagnosed previous heart attack or stroke in the past. In that case, those people should be taking a daily aspirin.
Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know that second part. Wow.
Yeah, we should talk about that more in depth next time, because I think that's a huge thing. I mean, I still see patients all the time and they come into ER that have never had a heart attack or a stroke, and you ask them what medication they're taking, and they say, I take a daily aspirin. And so, I always have to caution them that they may need to change that. So.
Yeah, I'd love to spend a minute on that. I mean, I think a lot of our audience, we're all getting to that age where we're sort of trying to do the right thing. And if there's something as easy as taking a pill or a vitamin or a supplement or whatever it might be, then to help us in that, that's important to know.
Sure.
I've kept you over time. Thank you, Dr. Michael Daignault. You can find him across social media. He's on Instagram. He's on all the social media platforms. Daignault is DAIGNAULT, for those who are just listening and not seeing it there on the screen. So appreciate you making time for us occasionally, and look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good day.
Yep, Dr. Daignault, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.